I grew up in a house where silence was not peace, it was control. Every sound felt like a test, every word like a risk. My father used to say that a quiet house was a disciplined one. I believed him for most of my childhood. Our home sat on the edge of a quiet suburb in the late 80s, the kind of place where neighbors waved politely and curtains never fluttered without reason. Inside, everything had its order. The dining table was always polished to a mirror shine, our shoes lined like soldiers near the door, and the air smelled faintly of aftershave and fear. My father's presence filled every corner. He was not a large man, but something about the way he carried himself made him feel like the walls bent around his will. When he entered a room, conversations shrank. Even the ticking clock seemed to slow down, waiting for permission to keep going. He had rules for everything: the way we ate, the way we stood, even the way we breathed when he was thinking. I once coughed during his evening newspaper reading, and his eyes rose over the edge of the pages like knives. That was the first time I learned that even breathing can be wrong if it's done at the wrong moment. Mother moved through the house like a shadow of her former self. She smiled, but her eyes were always searching, watching for his moods, reading the room before he spoke. She called it keeping the peace. I called it living on thin glass. Every morning started with his inspection. Our beds had to be tight enough to bounce a coin. Our shirts had to be crisp, shoes shining, posture straight. My younger sister Anna used to whisper to me that she dreamed of running away to a place where no one cared if your socks matched. I used to laugh quietly, but inside, I envied her courage even to imagine freedom. One evening, I came home late, 15 minutes past curfew. The sun was just fading, the streetlights blinking to life. I had been helping a friend fix his bike. When I opened the front door, my father was already standing in the hallway, his arms crossed, expression blank. That was always worse than anger. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He simply said, "What time is it?" I said, 7:15. His watch glinted under the light. "And what time are you supposed to be home?" 7? The silence after that was heavier than any punishment. He turned away, muttering something about standard slipping. I stood there frozen, hating how much I wanted to explain myself, to beg him not to be disappointed. But that's what he wanted: obedience without question, remorse without reason. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between the creaks of the old house. I remember thinking, maybe if I can be perfect, he'll finally stop looking at me like I'm failing at something I don't even understand. Years later, I'd realized that was the night I stopped being a boy and started becoming a reflection, someone shaped by fear, not by choice. By morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. He complimented my polished shoes before leaving for work. That was how he worked: punish with silence, reward with the illusion of normalcy. It kept me guessing, always chasing his approval. At school, I watched other kids talk back to their parents, laugh at mistakes, shrug off small scoldings. I envied them. Their fathers got angry, sure, but they forgave. Mine didn't. He expected perfection, a word that in our house felt heavier than love.
I don't remember the first time I disobeyed him. Maybe because it was too small to notice. Maybe because rebellion, in my world, didn't come as a roar, it came as a whisper. It started with the shirt, a plain white shirt that he insisted I iron every morning until it looked new. One day, I left a small wrinkle near the collar. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, a tiny, invisible act of defiance that only I knew about. I walked out that morning with my heart racing, half expecting him to stop me at the door, to see the imperfection. But he didn't. He just nodded stiffly, as if approving my effort. That's when I realized something powerful. He didn't see everything. From then on, I began testing the boundaries in small, careful ways. I left a book slightly crooked on the shelf, didn't polish my shoes for a day, or hummed softly when I was supposed to be silent. They were invisible rebellions, almost childish, but they made me feel alive, like I was reclaiming small pieces of myself that had been buried under his expectations. My sister, Anna, noticed before anyone else. "You're gonna get caught," she whispered one evening, eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and fear. "Maybe, but I'm tired of being scared all the time." She didn't say anything after that. She just looked at me, a look that said she wanted the same courage, but couldn't afford it. At school, my teacher started calling me disciplined, a word that made my stomach twist. They thought I was well-behaved, respectful, polite. They had no idea that obedience was just the only language I was allowed to speak. But something inside me was changing. The older I got, the more I began to question the things he said, the rules he lived by. Once during dinner, he made one of his speeches about the value of order. He talks about how chaos was weakness, how strong men never wavered. I looked at his face, the cold certainty in his eyes, and for the first time I felt something close to pity. "Strong men never wavered," he said. "But what kind of strength needs silence to survive?" One night when he was asleep, I sneaked into the living room and turned on the television, something strictly forbidden after 10 p.m. The screen flickered to life, filling the dark room with blue light. A late-night music show was playing, soft, haunting melodies that sounded nothing like the world I knew. I remember sitting there, knees pulled to my chest, listening. For the first time, I felt something I couldn't name. Not rebellion, not joy. Something like freedom. When I turned the TV off and crept back to my room, I saw my reflection in the hallway mirror. My face looked older somehow, like I'd aged a few years in that hour. That's when I understood that rebellion isn't just breaking rules, it's remembering who you are when no one's watching. But rebellion always comes with a price. The next morning, he noticed something different. Maybe it was the way I didn't flinch when he corrected me. Maybe it was the quiet steadiness in my eyes. He studied me for a moment too long at breakfast, then said, "You're becoming careless lately. I hope you're not forgetting the values I've taught you." I shook my head, my heart pounding. "No, sir." "Good," he said, but his eyes lingered. Because weakness starts small. Once you allow it, it spreads. He went back to reading the newspaper. I went back to pretending. That day at school, I couldn't stop hearing his voice in my head. Weakness starts small. But wasn't that what he was afraid of all along? That if we ever started thinking for ourselves, the whole illusion of control would crumble? Later that week, I was supposed to attend an after-school study group. Instead, I walked past the gates and kept walking, past the familiar streets, past the houses that looked like ours, into a part of town I'd never seen before. There was a park there, unkempt, loud, alive. Kids played, people laughed, a stray dog barked at bicycles. I sat on a bench, letting the noise fill me. It was chaos. Beautiful, messy chaos. A boy my age was sketching something on a piece of paper beside me. He caught my eye and smiled. "You new here?" "Yeah," I said. He shrugged. "You look like someone who never gets to laugh." I didn't know what to say. Maybe he was right. When I came home that evening, my father was waiting again. Same spot, in the hallway, same posture, same disappointment painted on his face. "You're late," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied, my voice trembling. "Where were you?" I hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, I realized something terrible. I didn't want to lie anymore, but I couldn't tell the truth either. "I lost track of time," I finally said. His eyes narrowed. He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply said, "You're starting to sound like your mother." It was meant as an insult. I took it as a compliment. That night, I lay awake again, listening to the silence of the house, a silence that now felt suffocating instead of safe. I imagined myself running away like Anna once dreamed, maybe finding that park again, maybe sitting on that bench without guilt. But I didn't run. Not yet. Because rebellion for me wasn't a sprint. It was a slow burn, spreading quietly through the cracks of his perfection. And deep down, I knew one day something would ignite.
There's a sound I still hear in my head sometimes. The sound of silence just before anger. It's heavier than shouting, colder than fear. It's the sound my father made when something inside him snapped quietly, without warning. That evening, the house smelled of polish and dust, that same dull scent that always hung around the wooden floors. I was sitting at the dining table, finishing my homework, when I heard his footsteps from the hallway. Slow, deliberate. He stood behind me for a long moment before speaking. "Your teacher called." My hand froze on the page. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. "She said you've been distracted lately, not participating, not performing as usual." I've been tired, that's all," I said quietly. "Tired?" His voice had that dangerous calm again. "Tired of what?" I didn't answer, because how could I tell him I was tired of being perfect? He walked around the table, his presence casting a shadow over my notebook. "Do you remember what I told you when you were a child?" I nodded automatically, that order is strength, chaos is weakness. He smiled, that thin, proud smile that never reached his eyes. "Good. So why are you letting weakness in?" Something inside me cracked. Maybe it was the weight of all those years, the silent dinners, the rules, the punishment hidden behind politeness. Or maybe it was because I was finally old enough to see him not as a god, but as a man. "I'm not weak," I said low, steady. "I just don't want to live like this anymore." The words came out before I could stop them. They hung in the air like smoke, fragile, irreversible. He blinked slowly. "What?" "Like you." For a second, everything stopped. The ticking of the old clock, the hum of the ceiling fan, even my own breathing. He just stared at me, a look not of anger, but betrayal. "You don't mean that," he said softly. "I do." "You don't talk, you command. You don't love, you control. You don't raise children, you build soldiers." He took a step closer. "Enough." But I didn't stop. "You think you've made me strong, but all you've made me is afraid." The silence that followed was worse than any shouting. It was the kind of silence that made walls feel like witnesses. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. It was quieter, almost trembling. "I gave you everything: discipline, education, a future, and this is what I get?" I didn't ask for any of that. His hand tightened on the edge of the table, knuckles white. "Ungrateful." He turned away, pacing to the window. For a moment I thought it was over, but when he turned back there was something wild in his eyes, something desperate, like a man losing his reflection. "You think rebellion makes you strong? You think freedom means disrespect?" "I just want to live without fear." "You need fear. Fear keeps you human." "No," I said, louder this time. "Fear keeps you obedient." It happened in a second. His hand slamming down on the table, papers flying, the sound echoing through the house. I flinched but didn't move away. He looked at me like he didn't recognize who I was anymore. Maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't.
For years, I'd imagined this moment, the confrontation, the release, the words I'd been too scared to say. But now that it was happening, it didn't feel victorious. It felt tragic, like two mirrors shattering at once. He walked to the hallway, his voice low. "Go to your room." I didn't move. "Go," he repeated. "I'm not a child anymore." He turned sharply, eyes burning with a fury that wasn't entirely about me. "Then act like a man and stop blaming your father for everything you can't face." I stood up slowly, heart pounding. Maybe being a man means not becoming you. He froze. His hand trembled slightly. He opened his mouth to say something, then stopped. For the first time in my life, I saw something crack behind his eyes. Not anger, not pride, fear. He turned away again, gripping the windowsill like it was the only thing keeping him upright. We stood there in silence, the air thick, heavy, suffocating. I wanted him to say something, anything, but he didn't. Finally, I picked up my bag and walked past him. My footsteps sounded too loud in that quiet house. I reached the door and stopped, my hand on the knob. "I don't hate you. I just can't love you the way you want me to." He didn't answer. I left. Outside, the air felt colder than I remembered. The streetlights flickered. The night smelled of rain. I walked aimlessly, the world spinning slow and strange around me. Every sound, the distant barking of a dog, the hum of a car engine, felt too sharp, too alive. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe I just wanted to feel the world without permission. When I finally stopped, I was standing near that same park. The one with the noise, the laughter, the life. Kids were still playing, even in the dark. A man passed by holding his daughter's hand. She was giggling about something small, something free. I sat on that same bench as before. And for the first time, I cried. Not from fear, not from guilt, but from release. Because rebellion wasn't about hating him. It was about finding myself outside his shadow.
It's strange how silence can follow you for years. You think you've outgrown it, the fear, the shame, the echo of raised voices, but it lingers. It waits in quiet corners, like a ghost that never left the old house. Years passed, and I thought I had escaped him. My father, his rules, the walls that hummed with unspoken tension. I moved to another city, got a job, bought a small apartment with peeling paint and crooked blinds. Freedom at first felt like noise. Music in the middle of the night, laughter too loud, doors left unlocked. I was drunk on the sound of choice. But even then, I could feel him. Not in body. I hadn't seen him since the night I ran, but in every decision I made. In how I checked the locks twice before sleeping. In how I avoided confrontation, even when I should have stood my ground. In how I flinched when someone raised their voice. He had trained me too well. My rebellion had broken his rule, but not his reach. For years I told myself I hated him. It was easier that way. Hate is clean, sharp, defined, a thing you can carry like a weapon. Love, on the other hand, is heavy and confusing. Love asks you to remember the times he fixed your bike chain, or stayed awake when you had a fever, or how his hand trembled when he signed your report card with quiet pride. Love makes monsters human again, and that hurts more than the punishment ever did. I was 29 when I got the call. My father had collapsed while mowing the backyard. A heart attack, they said. The neighbors found him beside the old fence, face to the grass, the wooden handle of the mower still clutched in his palm. I hadn't spoken to him in 17 years. The drive back to my hometown felt like moving through someone else's memory. The same narrow streets, the same faded houses. The paint on our porch had chipped away, but the door, that heavy wooden door, still creaked the same way when I opened it. The smell inside hit me like time travel. Floor polish, cigarettes, and the faint trace of aftershave. His room was exactly as I remembered. Books lined the walls in perfect symmetry. His cane, the same one that had once defined my boyhood, leaned quietly against the dresser. I picked it up, feeling its smooth surface beneath my fingers. For a moment, I expected to hear his voice, commanding, cold, but all that answered was silence. I don't know how long I stood there. My throat burned, but I didn't cry. Not at first. It wasn't grief that hit me. It was the absurdity of it all. How a lifetime of control could end so suddenly. How the man who believed in order had left the world in chaos, an unfinished cup of tea, an open drawer, unpaid bills scattered across the table. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of his bed, the cane resting beside me. Outside, the streetlight flickered through the blinds, striping the room with gold and shadow. And for the first time, I spoke out loud to the emptiness. I hated you, but you were the reason I survived. My voice cracked halfway through because it was true. His discipline had hurt me deeply, sometimes unforgivably, but it had also shaped the part of me that refused to surrender. The same defiance that once got me punished was the reason I learned to stand on my own. His fear taught me silence, but his absence taught me freedom. In the morning, I buried the cane beneath the old tree in the yard. It felt like burying both of us, the father who ruled with fear and the son who lived under it. I didn't leave flowers, just dirt, just closure. As I drove away, I caught one last glimpse of the house in the rearview mirror. It looked smaller now, almost fragile, like it had been waiting for release too. People talk about forgiveness as if it's something you give, but it's not. It's something you survive. It doesn't erase the past, it just allows you to live without flinching at it. Sometimes late at night, I still dream of that house. The floors creak, the clock ticks, and somewhere in the dark, I hear his footsteps. Steady, calm, and not angry anymore. He's just there, watching. And this time I don't hide. I turn, look at him, and whisper, I understand. Because maybe rebellion wasn't about shouting or running away. Maybe it was about surviving long enough to speak your own truth. And finally, after all those years, letting silence mean peace instead of fear.